And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
145. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. What is it? Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, everybody. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where, while the weather might not seem so nice, SpaceX is ready to launch a very nice mission for the National Reconnaissance Office and the NROL-69 Payload. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for today's launch broadcast, and joining me for this super secret mission to hopefully unravel some of those mysteries is Alex. How's it going, Alex?
I saw what you did there, but yeah, I'm doing fantastic, and we're gonna see some classified payload. I guess we're actually not gonna see it because we can't. But let's see it launch at the very least, right?
Yes, that's what we're hoping for, at least. Also, in the field today is Max Evans, who is not well, but is still amazing enough to go out there and get the video for us. So, while he may not have a voice, we absolutely have his views and hope that he feels better soon. And thank you, Max, still, for rolling out, and to the Space Force for allowing us actually on base for this one. Pushing the buttons, pulling the levers today is Carson Phillips. So, thank you, Carson, for bringing all of the views that we do have to you for today. I guess let's get started then, Alex, with this may be a kind of classified mission, but there's a couple things that we can figure out from it. So what do we know about NROL-69?
So apart from having the name NROL-69, other than that, we are not fully sure what it is because it's a classified payload. One thing that we do know, though, is you might have seen recently SpaceX launching these NROL missions that have carried Starshield satellites, right? That's part of the proliferated space architecture constellation that the National Reconnaissance Office has contracted SpaceX to launch. This is not part of that, or at least as far as we know, they have not announced it as part of that, right? So when they do, they say, hey, we're carrying out this mission for the proliferated space architecture, blah, 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 all that PR stuff. Let's be honest, it's a bit of a PR thing, but, it's what they have to do. Of course, they cannot really say, oh, we're doing this and declassify a bunch of information without authorization. But anyways, the thing is, so we at least have that it's probably not that, because otherwise they will have said it. But, not saying it doesn't mean it is not part of that, as always. And there's other pieces, of course, to this puzzle. So, for example, we know that this launch is going northeast out of the Cape, right? So we can glance some of the things from those notices and things like that. For example, here from marine notices and some of the aerial notices and things like that. And one of the things is, while the launch has notices, this one out of the Cape imply a inclination of the orbit relative to the equator of like maybe 50 to 55 degrees, right? When it turns out, so once the second stage does all of its things, the second stage will be deorbiting, right? And that deorbit area, that hazard zone for that deorbit, it actually lines up more with an inclination of 60 to 65 degrees rather. So it's a bit higher inclination. So we think that perhaps on today's mission, SpaceX will do another burn after it has already, entered low Earth orbit, it'll probably do another burn to change the inclination. So there are multiple things that we can know from this. It's a low Earth orbit mission because they'll have plenty of performance to be able to deorbit the second stage. And we'll talk about this later in more detail, but also the first stage is coming back to land. So we're going to have an RTLS, a return to launch site landing. So there's plenty of performance for that. So it's not a heavy satellite, it is going to a low Earth orbit. But also, if you can see there on your screen, you might notice a strange gray band on the second stage. That is what they call the mission extension kit. And it's essentially part of a series of different modifications to the second stage to be able to stay in orbit for prolonged times. So if you let that second stage up there for a long time, that gray band is located on the RP1 tank, on the kerosene tank. That kerosene will eventually just freeze, or at least get very, very cold and not work properly. Like it will get very viscous and things like that to get through the pumps, for example, properly. So they use that gray stripe to be able to absorb a little bit more of sunlight and keep the RP1, that kerosene, at a higher temperature. So we know it's going to be going to low Earth orbit. It's not a really heavy satellite, and it's going to stay up there, that second stage, for a little while, perhaps anywhere between 2 to 3 hours, perhaps more. The most that we know these second stages can go is maybe like 6 or 7 hours with that mission extension kit, so no more than that. That second stage re-entry area is also indicative that it's not going to be re-entering after one orbit. It's going to spend a couple of orbits around the Earth. So all of this lines up with a very specific type of mission that we've seen in the past that has been at least partially declassified, which is the what is called the NOS satellite, which is the Naval Ocean Surveillance System. And so these satellites are located in orbits that are around 1,000 to 1,200 kilometers above the Earth, and they are at around 63-degree inclination. So what we think is going to happen today with this rocket is it's probably carrying one of those satellites, and it's going to go first into sort of like a parking low Earth orbit, which is going to be somewhere around 55-degree inclination and maybe somewhere around 200 kilometers. Then on SpaceX's website, there's a second burn that is supposed to happen at 46 minutes, and we think that's going to be to raise the orbit and change the inclination to that 63-degree. Then as it goes up to that apogee, that highest point in the orbit again, it'll circularize again and do a third burn to get that satellite into a 1,000 kilometer orbit, and then deorbit from that. And because it needs to do multiple burns and stay in orbit for long, because it needs to get to different places and whatnot, that's probably why it has the mission extension kit. So this is a long 5-minute explanation, I know, but this is all the things that we can glean just from notices and like having a little bit of intuition about these things sometimes helps. This is why I'm always saying that it's just PR about the, not declassifying some of this stuff, because it's like, if we can figure this out, imagine China. But anyways.
And the rocket is already launched at this point. It was nice chatting with it. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for the very thorough explanation there, Alex. So, yeah, in other words, we kind of have a rough idea of where it's going. That arrow was very helpful. Thank you, Carson, for the extension kit. And that second stage deorbit is very interesting with its location and gives us a lot of info into that inclination. So, about the booster now. Do I dare? Thankfully, this is a much shorter list to go through for today's flight for booster 1092. This is going to be its second flight. So it currently has a history of Starlink 12-13 and NROL-69, aka today's flight. This is actually coming back to land back at the Cape, at Landing Zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, just a couple miles away from where it takes off, and just a very few miles from where this camera is located, so we should get some fantastic landing views. Meanwhile, Doug is downrange to recover the fairings from the mission, and then bring those back to be refurbished and flown again. So this booster with a 25-day turnaround there. Now, another interesting fact, and there's of course a million asterisks with this one, which is why this is not your ordinary NROL-69 launch, is that this will be the 450th orbital flight for Falcon 9, right?
Yeah. A couple of launches ago, we talked about how it was the 450th mission for Falcon 9, right? But it was the 448th orbital flight. And that is because there's two missions that there were no... so one of them was not a flight, even though it was originally targeting orbit. And there's some definitions of flight that you might apply to it anyways, which is AMO-6, right? AMO-6 was targeting orbit, but unfortunately, 2 days before its launch, it exploded on the pad, that very same pad that this launch is happening from. Thankfully, it was a long time ago, but, it happened. And then there's another one, which is in-flight abort test, if you all remember, January 2020. Amazing launch, amazing visuals for those that were in the right positions.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, right. And so it was a suborbital launch, but it was a full Falcon 9 rocket. The only thing that was sort of mock-up, so to speak, was the second stage engine, which was just a simulator, but it was fueled. It was an actual second stage with actual tanks, actual pressurization systems, all the things that you will expect from a Falcon 9. So it was a fully Falcon 9 launch. It just, it was on purpose a suborbital launch, and it was spectacular. But since that time that we mentioned the 450th mission, there's been another launch, the NROL-67 mission out of Vandenberg. So that was the 449th orbital flight of Falcon 9. So this is going to be the 450th orbital flight of Falcon 9. And that is not counting even Falcon Heavy, because Falcon Heavy is like another 11 missions. So, yeah.
Exactly. And also, if this succeeds, will be the 50th successful landing at Landing Zone 1, as you saw there on that data sheet as well. So, very exciting stuff, actually, for this mission. And thanks for bringing up the sore spot. I happened to be at the press site for in-flight abort, and it exploded, which Das had a fantastic view of from a boat. He was probably one of the few people that had the great views, because us at the press site had a cloud in the way. There was one cloud in the whole sky, and it was right in the way as it exploded. I'm not bitter. Let's get back to this mission. Let me thank a couple people here really quick. GSC Hydro, thank you for becoming a Capcom member. Reminder, Capcom and above gets access to the NSF Discord, all of the food channels where you can tell Jack he's wrong about bagels, the pre and post shows for the Flame Trench, and all of the other spaceflight goodies in there, of course. So stop on in and say hi, and thank you so much. Also, Seda, thank you for becoming a Padrat member. Now, speaking of the landings, as mentioned, the 50th hopefully successful landing back at LZ1 there. Archie is wondering, Alex, when can we expect the new landing zones to be done? I've heard they're getting scrapped or the lease is going to expire soon, as SpaceX will make new pads.
Yeah, so the landing zones, those landing attempts that you just mentioned, right? It's going to be one of the last few ones. There's still at least I think a handful more on the schedule because of crew missions and Dragon missions to the ISS in general and other sorts of missions going on from the Cape. But there's not a lot remaining for those landing zones. And in fact, I will hazard to guess that maybe we will not get a landing zone 2 landing before it's retired, because I don't see any Falcon Heavies until July, which is when that lease ends. So the lease of those 2 landing zones ends in July. And what SpaceX is planning to do is to build landing zones both at Slick 40 and at LC-39A. So the way that's happening is why, the reason why this is happening, is because the Space Force, the Space Launch Delta 45, a few years ago, they decided that they're going to be utilizing as many of these sites as they can to provide a place for launch providers to put their rockets and launch from there. So from Launch Complex 13, which is where those 2 landing zones are, they're giving the lease to Via Space and Phantom Space. So those two companies have small satellite launchers, right? Sort of the size of Electron and similar rockets like that, right? And they're going to be taking over that site starting, in July when that lease ends for SpaceX. And apart from that, what the Space Force said, look, you guys are launching a lot and are landing a lot. And every time you land, right, your boosters are landing back at landing zones 1 or 2. And if you're launching from LC-39A, say, for example, like on Crew 10 the other day, then you're having the area around LC-39A being closed and also the area around the landing zones. So it makes a mess with all of the scheduling and all of the people that need to be on base, right? It is quite, it's definitely disrupting, so to speak. So what the Space Force has done is they allow companies to be able to lend back their boosters to the Cape, but they told them you have to have a landing pad on your own launch site in order to be able to do that. Otherwise, go downrange, right? That's the gist of it. Of course, it's more, formalistic and everything. There's better words being used and all of that. But that's sort of the rule that they imposed, that if a provider wants to land back their booster at the Cape, they need to have a landing site on their launch site. So SpaceX said, okay, we can do that. It's easy, right? It's like patch of concrete. We can just build that. And they've proposed that already for LC-39A and Sleek 40. At Sleek 40, they will only have one landing pad because they only launch Falcon 9 missions from there. And from LC-39A, we think it's going to be 2 landing pads for Falcon Heavy. One of the things as well is that they cannot land, they cannot launch from LC-39A and land at Sleek 40, for example, once that's built. So, because this rule explicitly says that you cannot just launch from one place and land at the other and things like that, just jumping around launch sites, and that's not how it works, right? You land at the place that you're launching from, essentially. It's not going to be a problem when Super Heavy comes around, right? But Falcon 9 still needs to land on concrete pads. But yeah, when that's going to happen, we don't know. Maybe we're going to have to see some of these missions that should be RTLS landing on drone ships, because the environmental process is still ongoing. So we'll see.
We will see, indeed, as time goes on. Of course, we'll continue to do our KSC flyovers and see progress on all of that work and look up all the paperwork for you. So with all of that, we're already at under the T-minus 40-minute mark, which means we are already into the countdown timeline here. So they are doing the go, no-go poll for propellant load. That should wrap up in under a minute. Of course, we don't get to hear that even when it is a non-NROL mission, just because they don't let us listen into the loops. Also, it's done by buttons on computers. If all is good, then at T-minus 35 minutes, that's when they will begin the propellant load, starting with Stage 1, the RP-1, the Rocket Propellant 1 kerosene, as well as the liquid oxygen, both simultaneously. Meanwhile, the second stage will just get that RP-1 load. That goes until about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds when we see the best vent, which is also known as the chill down line, for the LOX load, which will begin at T-minus 16 minutes. So all of that still to come on the timeline. Now, you mentioned the 45th Space Launch Delta 45 is what they're called now, which includes the 45th Weather Squadron, and we've yet to talk about that today. But the weather, while it looks super gray and super cloudy and all of that, amazingly, is 90% go. So according to the forecast there, that 10% is the probability of violation. So that's 90% go. The only concern being the thick cloud layers rule, which having visuals on the rocket, as you've seen from Vandenberg, is not a requirement for launch. It more has to do with the type of clouds and the potential for creating its own lightning as it goes through it. But based on the cloud layers that we see here, it doesn't seem like that's an issue today. It's just going to potentially obstruct some of the views. And as for the booster recovery weather, upper level winds, solar activity, all of those are low to no concern today. So at least the weather is nice. for today's launch. And yeah, someone should probably count the number of times that we say the word nice during today's live stream and send it to me on the socials. I'm interested to see what that becomes.
One thing to mention though is that it is true that there are clouds, and we sometimes talk about how clouds are a concern. Sometimes, like in that same forecast, it said that the primary concern, the only thing that made that be at 10% was just thick cloud layers rule. But even the sort of the discussion on the document, it says most of this deck still looks too high and cold to be a thick cloud layers concern, but there remains a slight possibility for lower clouds to come in sooner and threaten the launch window. So it's like just a little tiny bit, even though it says thick cloud layer rule is one of the primary concerns. It's still like just a little bit of concern. It's not that much.
My favorite is the launches where they have the cumulus cloud rule, and then you get out there and there's one thin wispy cloud. And it's like, okay. I think we'll be launching weather-wise at least. You can never be for certain with the rocket and all of that, but weather looks good at least. So we will hopefully get good views of the launch. And a reminder, this is an RTLS, a return to launch site mission. So this will be landing just a couple miles away at LZ1. So hopefully we'll get good views of that too. And now, of course, with this being an NROL mission, the question becomes here from Supersonic Retro Propulsion, do we expect any second stage views or telemetry today, Alex?
Well, we are definitely going to have, or at least try to have any second stage views from the ground. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get from SpaceX those views, those onboard, camera views that sometimes they stream and everything. So yeah, because for these missions, what they do is they just keep track of the first stage. They follow it along and things like that. The most is maybe we get to hear a call out of confirming that the fairing separation has occurred, which, to be frank, it's a really big deal, right? If the payload fairing separation doesn't happen, then that's sort of a problem, right? And it wouldn't be the first time that a classified mission launches and we don't get to hear that, and then we found out that there's a payload stuck inside of a payload fairing. But yeah.
Yeah, or there's pieces of insulation or things that came off of the fairing halves, or it's a tricky thing with the fairings. We don't talk about it that often, but yeah, they play a significant role, obviously, in the aerodynamics of the launch. But the separation mechanisms are different on different rockets, and this one is a pusher system with an active and a passive side, right?
Yeah, there's a pneumatic system. It's usually like pre-pressurized a few seconds before separation, and then it sort of pushes out it actually gets triggered and then separates the pushers away. I think there's 4 or 6 of them. Might be 6 instead of 4, but yeah. Whenever they fly with the extended fairing, the longer one, that one actually has explosives on them, but it's actually explosives that sort of activate a sort of the way that they explain it, it's sort of like there's an inflatable seam in between the two fairing halves, and the explosive sort of like pushes away the two halves in between the seams, and there's still pneumatic pushers involved. So it's like a mix of pneumatics and explosives. It's a bit weird.
Explosives. There we go. But that extended fairing has not flown yet for Falcon, right?
No, although we expect to fly perhaps in the next few years. If it ever actually launches, perhaps the first flight of the Gateway station will carry that. Haven 2, for example, we know that from the vast tour that we did, right? That Max, the CEO, he explained that they're launching that on a Falcon Heavy with extended fairing to be able to fit the longer Haven 2 modules, which are substantially longer than the one that they are building for Haven 1. So those kinds of missions will benefit a lot, and it's actually on their payload users guide. So anybody, commercial or military, that wants to use it, it's there.
Yes, and we've seen one out in the wild that they actually had it sitting out for a while at Slick 40, which is where this launch is, but it exists. One does exist. It just has not flown yet.
Yeah.
Boy, one of the really popular topics here as we wait to see fuel loading, which should be underway at this point, as we are just about 31 and a half minutes away from the scheduled launch of the NROL-69 mission here. I'm really interested in the future of the RTLS for this. Here's a question from Jasper, who's wondering, would a rocket that launches from 39A be allowed to land at Slick 40?
Unfortunately, no, they are not, because it's coming back again to the disruption, right? You need to be able to have the least disruption possible, and the only way to do that is to land back at the launch site. So there you have the confirmation that they are indeed going through propellant load. So this was a few minutes ago, of course, before propellant load started. Propellant load is already underway, and I think I can actually see some condensation already on the liquid oxygen tank on the booster. But yeah, so today's mission, that booster is coming back to landing zone 1, right? In the future, they're going to have landing zones at Slick 40 and LC39A. If they launch from Slick 40, they need to land back at Slick 40's landing zone. If they launch from 39A, they need to land back at LC39A's landing zone. That is the rule. But knowing SpaceX, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they did a bit of a loopy-loop around the rules. Yeah.
Rules are meant to be broken, and if anyone's going to do
Exactly.
it would be SpaceX.
But yeah.
One of the other proposals from Logan was saying, what if they put the drone ship relatively close to the shore/launch site in the meantime? How come they haven't done that? Is there a reason why they're always the downrange and not maybe landing back on a drone ship closer to shore?
Well, they've done that in the past here at the Cape when, for example, CRS-17 happened. They had at LC-1, one of the Crew Dragon capsules, the first one that launched on the Demo 1 mission. They returned it from that mission, right? They wanted to use it on the in-flight abort test mission. And in a ground test at landing zone 1, there was like a little test stand for Crew Dragon there. And they were testing the Super Dracos, and right before that, the pressurization system failed and the whole thing exploded. And so there was a big spill of hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide and things like that. And so they couldn't access that place for a long while. It was big, hazardous area there. So they were not able to land back those boosters at landing zone 1. And instead, they put out there a drone ship. Back then, it was, of course, I Still Love You when it was still on the East Coast. And it was put offshore like a few kilometers offshore. It's also happened at Vandenberg. There was a mission back in the day when they were still not allowed to be able to return back to the launch site at LC4. And they put the drone ship just outside of the landing of the launch site. It was like 10 kilometers away. So yeah, they could do that on RTLS missions whenever that lease expires, and if they don't have the landing zones built at 40 and 39A. The problem is, of course, that sort of holds up one of those drone ships for another potential mission, say, for example, a Starlink mission or other customer missions. And yeah, it's a bit of a pain, to be fair, to be having those drone ships be held up for that. But we'll see what they do.
And Rip Ripley.
Yeah.
By the way, for those who don't remember, Ripley was the name of the I don't want to say dummy, but the mannequin, shall we say, that was used aboard the DM-1, the Demo 1 mission, to dock to the ISS, test all the systems without any actual people in return. It was nice knowing you. But at this point, yeah, we are now 27 and a half minutes to go until launch, fueling underway, weather cloudy, but still looking good up to this point. And we will hopefully see the launch of booster 1092 on NROL-69. So many numbers. Here's a question from Danny, and this is a perfect Alex question. When rockets relight their engines during flight, like a boost back and landing burn, do they have to do a purge again, or is it enough to just do the spin up and ignite? Oh, there's the arrow, by the way, on the frost line. Thank you,
Yeah.
Carson, Mr. Arrow today.
And yeah, there's usually purges when they do that. You may see this especially before entry burn or even before landing burn. So maybe later today you'll see that when the booster comes back after the entry burn happens, they do like a vent out of the aft end of the rocket, and then as it comes back down to the landing side, you will see like these little vents coming out from the octaweb. Those are usually the engine chill. So you'll see the engine chill happening before the burn happens. I don't know if they do purges, but they do have to have a sort of, short engine chill process to be able to do that boost back, entry, and landing burns. So yeah.
There
Just
you go. I
gotta-
knew you did that.
Yeah, just gotta pay lots of attention. It's usually better seeing on nighttime landings for when you have the camera view on the booster, because sometimes during the reentry, that engine chill gets lit up a bit as well by the plasma as it reenters. Right, it's sort of like a backlight kind of phenomenon that happens there. It's really interesting.
It is really cool. Also, Carson not appreciating apparently the Mr. Arrow nickname, so we'll make sure that sticks. Now, we talk about LZ1 and LZ2 at the Cape, and we talked about LZ4 out on the West Coast. The question is, what happened to LZ3? I think LZ4 kind of gets its name because it's out over at Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg, and these were the first and second landing zones that SpaceX ever built here at the Cape for LZ1 and 2. Is that right?
Yes, but there were
Ooh.
also plans for a third landing pad. So the original outline for the landing zones at Launch Complex 13 at the very beginning, it was like one big landing pad and like 4 other small landing pads. That was a bit weird. And then they changed their minds when they actually started building landing zone 1. And it was going to be a sort of like a triangle kind of thing of landing zone 1, 2, and 3. And 3 will have been built sort of a bit more to the east of where landing zone 1 is. And that was sort of the idea at the time. And then when they actually built landing zone 2, that was like 3 or 4 years after that. Because remember, LC1 was used for the first time on December 2015. It's going to be almost 10 years. Jesus. And then the second landing zone that was built 2 years later in 2017 for the Falcon Heavy mission that was on February 2018. So, there was a bit of a gap in between, and in between those dates of construction, they changed their minds and said, you know what, there's not going to be a landing zone 3. We're not. But when they were building landing zone 1, they were also building landing zone 4 at Slick 4 West as, Space Launch Complex 4 West, because there's the launch site is at east and the landing zone is at west, about 400 meters to the west of the launch mount. And so they were building that, and I actually remember, having talks about them maybe landing back at landing zone 4 at that point. They did not reveal the name though until like 2017 or 2018 or something like that, when they actually were able to land back there. But they were already building that, whereas landing zone 2 actually came later. So landing zone 3 was supposed to be at the Cape, but it was never built, and landing zone 4 was supposed to be landing zone 4 from the beginning, and it just kept being 4. And it sort of fits, because as you say, right, it's also Space Launch Complex 4, so landing zone 4. What are going to be the names for the ones that's like 40 and 39A? No idea.
We'll hopefully find out. And I do have a follow-up to that I will discuss in about a little after 5 seconds from now, because we are coming up... Oh, no, wait, 22 minutes. I'm thinking... Anyway, continuing with my conversation.
You were on Falcon Heavy.
Yeah, so don't mind me. Anyway, it's interesting because this seems to be a tradition at the Cape where there are a lot of things where they plan for a whole bunch of them and not all of them actually happen. Thinking, for example, with Launch Complex 39. There were supposed to be a whole bunch of them down the Cape. I actually have an old Time magazine article where on the cover it shows about 7 different LC-39s all launching Saturn V's, which would have been amazing. There is, like we talked about 39A and 39B, kind of like LZ-3, there was technically the beginning of LC-39C. If you look very carefully, you could see it sometimes from aerial views on Google Maps. There is a start of a third branch of the crawlerway. You have the one that goes to A, that one that goes to B, and a third one that goes absolutely nowhere. That nowhere was supposed to be to 39C. They just realized that they didn't need that many, and with all the programs being canceled and stuff, with the Vietnam and all that, they decided to scrap 39C. So there's remnants of it there. All right, I think I stalled long enough with that answer as well. We are now about 30 seconds away from the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second vent, aka the best vent. So Alex, as we expect this to happen in just a couple seconds, can you explain what we are going to see and why we are going to see it?
Yeah, so coming up next should be the preparation for the stage 2 liquid oxygen load. So for the last half hour, maybe a little bit more than that, they have conditioned all of the lines from the tank farm out to the TE, to that sort of middle point on the stromback. But now they need to condition the rest of that line that goes to the second stage. So that's why we're seeing that vent, because now they're chilling down the other part that goes to the liquid oxygen tank on the second stage. So that you see there venting, that is gaseous oxygen that is being vented, and the white is actually from the humidity on the air, water vapor essentially condensating. But it's because of that gaseous oxygen coming off from that stromback, and so they flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen through the line. It warms up because the line is warm, and that's why they need to chill it down to be able to load that liquid oxygen through, right? And so it warms up a little bit, it turns into gas, they need to vent that, and that's what the T-minus 20-minute vent is.
There we go. And that also indicates that everything's proceeding on time, hitting at that exact 20-minute, 20-second mark. That will stop at T-minus 16 minutes, and once that happens, then we will know that liquid oxygen load on stage 2 is underway. So that is quite nice to see for this very nice mission that is NROL-69, because I saw someone ask, is this a Starlink? Surprisingly, no, we have a non-Starlink launch again today. So this for the National Reconnaissance Office Launch 69, hence the NROL. And Alex, I know you gave quite a long description earlier on in the live stream, but for those kind of just joining, Can you give a little summarized version of what we do know about this very secretive payload?
Yeah, based on multiple things like hazard notices for the air or for marine navigational waters and things like that, it looks like today SpaceX will launch a classified payload for the National Reconnaissance Office called, the mission is called NROL-69, but on board we think is a naval ocean surveillance system satellite, which is essentially just a sort of, signal intelligence satellite, spy satellite for essentially the U.S. Navy. And one of the things that characterizes these satellites is that they usually go into 1,000, maybe 1,200 kilometer orbit and 63-degree inclination. And so the profile that we think Falcon 9 will do today is it's going to go first, as usual, to a parking low Earth orbit, right? With maybe an inclination of 50 to 55 degrees. Then it's going to do another burn 46 minutes into the mission to raise the orbit to that 1,000 kilometer altitude, and then do also an inclination change, and then maybe another burn perhaps, because it also carries a gray stripe on the second stage kerosene tank, which is precisely for a mission extension kit, which means it allows the second stage to stay a little bit longer in space, not have that kerosene being frozen by the some of the lower temperatures of space that the second stage may see. So that is more or less what we think is going to happen today. But as always, this is a national Department of Defense mission for the National Reconnaissance Office. So that means a lot of the details are secret and classified. And so this is all just guesstimates based on, clues, different things that we can see from this mission and rocket.
Right. On SpaceX's website, they do mention that there will be a second burn of the second stage 46 minutes into flight. If there's anything beyond that, another one, they haven't posted it. When that separation or where that separation occurs, they have not posted that either. So a lot of what we're getting here is also based off of, as you mentioned, the marine and air notices that they put out as safety areas. And in fact, that also gives us the indication of the angle of which this is going up, as you mentioned, the inclination, and a good idea of where to look for the launch. So this is going to be a northeasterly launch. So if you are along the northeastern parts of the United States, potentially up towards parts of Canada, they're quite difficult to see during the day, I will say that. But it never hurts to go out and take a look. So that is going northeast for today's launch, and as you mentioned, the second stage in a very odd deorbit location off the coast of Madagascar. So that is the trajectory to look out for there. That area is the hazard for the fairings, and that is the hazard area for the second stage deorbit. Now, if anyone is along the northeastern part of the United States, of course along Florida as well, anywhere on that east coast, and you do happen to see it, make sure you send us a picture or a video, whatever you get, to our socials. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on X, Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok. So if you catch us on any of those, please tag us in it. I always love seeing it, in all honesty. It's so cool to see the trajectory of it as it goes up the coast, and you see a photo from Florida, then from the Carolinas, and from New York or New Jersey, all the way up. I love that, just to track the rocket and see how many of you are watching it along with us. Let me take a moment here and thank some people. Ethereal Swordsman, good to see you, Ethereal Swordsman, with the tip, tips.nasaspaceflight.com, saying, speaking of LZ-1, I'm going to put this one to you, Alex. Do we think that Vaya and Phantom will get their rockets flying? For those who don't know, they're the companies that will be taking over LC-17. Is it 17 or 13? 13. AKA 13, aka LC's 1 and 2. Also, still waiting for anything to fly from Slick 48. I love they made that because there was so much interest in 39C, and then everyone just took their own pad and it never got used. So, any words from Vaya and Phantom Space that would basically take LC-13 once LZ's 1 and 2 lease are up?
I think in the case of Phantom Space, they want to launch next year. I'm going to be a bit skeptical about that timeline, though, because I have not seen anything beyond some renders, right? And then from Via Space, I have seen, though, on their site, they have like footage of firings and things like that. They use hybrids, hybrid propulsion for their rockets. What I don't know is what's the status of the rocket development and things like that. Of course, if anybody from those companies are watching, we will welcome a lot of that information, because then we can feature that on our upcoming Space Coast update. So, just reach out. I'm not begging or anything, but hey, it will be fine, because we want more launches from the Space Coast.
We won't say no, that's for sure.
Exactly.
More launches, more better. More rockets, more better. You know the drill. Anonymous gifting 10 Red Team memberships, starting with 5 and then another 5. Thank you so much. If you got one of those gifted memberships, please make sure to thank Anonymous, which sounds strange to say out loud, but appreciate it. And then CM Vlog, will there be a Falcon Eye launch next week? I will be in the Cape and want to see a launch in person. Well, Alex, I believe that there is an app or a website that you can use to keep track of all of the launches that are upcoming.
Yeah, and what's funny is that, unless it's a very rare day of like or week of the year or something for SpaceX or something, like if you go to Florida for like a week period of time or something like that, you're bound to see some launch at any point, right? It will be quite a bad luck for you to not be able to watch a launch if you go there for like a week or something. Maybe you go for a week, you see a launch, and then Falcon 9 gets grounded. But that's never happened to anybody here, right?
No, Alex, never.
Nobody. Yeah, never. But yeah, that's one of the things of Falcon 9 these days, right? It sort of launches 3 or 4 times a week nowadays. 1 or 2 times of those 2 or 3 times, or like 3 or 4 times a week, is from Vandenberg. So usually half in half. That sort of distribution, or maybe 2/3 of those launches are from the Cape and 1/3 from Vandenberg. But that's pretty much like you're bound to see a launch. Now, next week, there's a very exciting launch happening. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to have an RTLS, but it's going to be the FRAM2 mission from 39A, which is going to be launching crew to a polar orbit. Like, how cool is that? That's going to be the first time any person is going to be orbiting the Earth over the poles, essentially, right? Which is quite bonkers to think about. But yeah, that's one of the interesting missions that you might see next week. And of course, using the next spaceflight website and app, you're gonna be able to check out many more, because I think even maybe ULA might be launching in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks from now. So if you stick around a little bit longer, you might even be able to see an Atlas. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But with there's always not your ordinary Starlink that pops up. So keep an eye out for it, and there's a very good chance that you will see something when you're out there. So definitely worth taking a look. And of course, if you're wondering where to launch, we actually have a video that you can check out on how to view a launch right here on the YouTubes. We are now 10 minutes away, though, from this not Starlink mission. This is the NROL-69 mission. Now, weather-wise, of course, it does look quite a bit gray and cloudy, but the official forecast that we have seen so far remains positive. It is a currently 90% chance of favorable weather, per the official forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron at Space Launch Delta 45, and the latest update that we saw from SpaceX as they were beginning propellant load was also that weather remained 90% favorable, so everything looking good for today's launch for the National Reconnaissance Office, hence the NROL Mission 69. This one, as a reminder, we talked about going to LZ1, but I don't think we've talked about yet recently, at least since the beginning of the stream, about the booster itself and some of the mission milestones that we'll see here numbers-wise. So, Alex, this is not your ordinary NROL mission either, as we have a relatively new booster and a big number for launches.
Yeah, so this booster is it's almost new. It's just the second flight, right? Like if you were to sell a car that you just said, "Oh, I've driven it once," right? It's like, this is new, right? So similarly with this Falcon 9, it's only flown once, that Starlink Group 12-13 mission about 25 and a half days ago. And yeah, like just the second flight for this booster. Now, as you mentioned, there's some interesting milestones, like round numbers for this mission, right? For example, it should be the 10th launch of this month, just to put in perspective, if you include Starship, of course. And it is also the 450th orbital flight of Falcon 9, which is a very nice round number. And if you like nice round numbers, it's also the 50th landing on LC1 if it succeeds. Of course, we're not counting our eggs just yet, but it would if it actually is successful. Out of 51 attempts, RIP B1050. But
Yeah, Sierra 17, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
With
that
a
one had a
mouse
stuck
food.
Yeah, that one had a stuck thruster, kind of went spinning, and so they intentionally splashed that one into the ocean as opposed to causing damage to the LZs. But that was years ago, and hopefully, yes, 450 orbital Falcon 9 launches would be pretty amazing. Again, that's not counting Amos 6, which had the RUD on the pad back in, I believe, 2016. And then also not counting the in-flight abort test in January of 2020, which was designed to be suborbital and designed to essentially destroy the booster, which it did. We are now 7 minutes away, which means engine chill should be underway for the 9 Merlin 1D engines. Alex, what is the point of chilling those engines?
Well, they're going to be flowing a lot of liquid oxygen through those pumps. The Merlin engine uses a sort of single shaft pump for the liquid oxygen and the kerosene, of course, separate. Otherwise, it will be a very bad day for that engine. But the pump for the liquid oxygen, it's going to have this very cryogenic, very cold liquid flowing through. And right now, well, now no longer, it's at ambient temperature. But a while ago, it was at ambient temperature, whatever the temperature it is in Florida right now, which is probably way above what any difference in temperature material can handle. And so one of the things that they do is they just condition that pump, they condition the engine by being able to flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen through. They open the pre-valve from the tank to the engines. In all of those 9 engines on the first stage, and they flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen through to lower the temperature slowly, bit by bit, on those pumps to get them to that conditioning phase, that really cold, roughly minus 200 degrees Celsius temperature that the liquid oxygen is when loaded on the Falcon 9. So it is very important, not just because of the pump and the materials that it is made of, that will be a very bad day for the materials, that thermal shock, but also because if you load that liquid oxygen through at fuel, at full flows, you will have a lot of that liquid oxygen turning into vapor very rapidly. And then if you don't vent that out, or you do it very quickly, and so there's a lot of vapor being produced very quickly, you have an overpressure event. And yeah, that's a very technical term for going boom.
Yeah.
So you don't want that on your rocket engine, right? And pumps. And so that's why they do it this way. Pretty much every cryogenic engine uses this sort of engine chill method. We see that with Raptor, we see that with the RS-25, many other engines out there. We have some merch about them on the store, by the way, if you want to catch that. But yeah.
Shop.spaceflight.com, yes. At this point now, we should be getting to retraction ever so slightly of the strong back. That is the structure you see right there in the center of your screen with those little yellow clamps that have opened up from underneath the fairing halves and leans back 1.8 degrees away from the rocket. So it's not a lot, but it will throw all the way back just ahead of liftoff to avoid causing any potential damage to that strong back, that metallic structure that helps roll out the vehicle and raise it vertical out at the pad, sometimes called the transporter erector, or TE. So under 4 minutes to go, coming up soon on the wrapping up of propellant loads, starting with the first stage and then completing the liquid oxygen load up in that second stage as well.
Such a great view of the rocket.
Yes, we have fantastic views today. Despite the cloudy background, we have views from the KSC press site. We have this view from the Space Force. We also have Wade, Dr. WD-40, who is out in the field, and I believe Jerry is going to try and get us some fantastic aerial views via drone within the keep. That's not within the keep out zone. There is a no drone zone area. He's within all legal areas. So lots of things to keep an eye out for here as we come up on the 3-minute mark until launch. So Alex, what can we expect in the last 3 minutes before the launch of this NROL-69 classified mission for the National Reconnaissance Office?
Yeah, so we should be wrapping up of that liquid oxygen load on the first stage right around now. And then in about a minute or so from now, we're going to have liquid oxygen load being wrapped up on the second stage. We're going to see the return of that vent on the stromback, that little pipe sticking out to the left of that stromback, that structure behind the rocket. And we're going to have all of these, closeouts and depressurizations and everything, those pushbacks that they do to be able to depressurize and sort of save the stromback ahead of the liftoff. I just heard a call out that stage 1 liquid oxygen load is complete. So first stage is complete. The next thing after that, at T-minus 1 minute, the ground computers will hand over control of the countdown to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. The tanks will pressurize for flight. There'll be multiple automated checks on that last minute of the count, making sure that everything is ready for launch. And of course, if everything looks good, the launch director will do its last go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. But there you can see that vent from the Stromberg that I just mentioned. So that indicates liquid oxygen load on the second stage is done.
There you go. So with that, we have a fully fueled Falcon 9 at Space Launch Complex 40 ready to launch, and then the first stage ready to land back at LZ-1, just a couple miles away from where this shot is right now. So with 90 seconds to go, as you mentioned, the next thing will be the tanks pressurizing to flight levels, as well as Falcon 9 entering startup, which is that onboard computer takeover. So far, everything looking good for today's launch. Again, a reminder, this is a classified mission, so we will not get any second stage views, but we will have all of our cameras tracking the launch and that first stage landing. So at this point, we are now at 1 minute to go. Tanks pressurized. Falcon 9 should be entering startup. We'll get that confirmation shortly. And I know, Alex, you'll let us know when we do.
Yep, they just went through startup.
All right, so next will be that go for launch from the launch director. And that should also be getting confirmation any moment. As we come up on 30 seconds to launch. A reminder, we will be quiet during the actual launch itself and let you listen to the fantastic launch sounds of Falcon 9.
Go for launch.
There we go. 20 seconds now. So the next thing to look for will be kind of that steam rising at the base of the rocket as the water from the rainbirds interacts with the plume from the engines. And that'll be followed a couple seconds after that by launch. So we're waiting there for ignition and liftoff of Falcon 9. A nice launch on a nice day for NROL-69. Vehicle is through max Q, it looks like. That's maximum aerodynamic pressure pushing down on the vehicle. You saw there from that side-on view a shot of the vapor cone as it punches its way up into space. And so far, we are 90 seconds to flight. Everything looking good. And now as it goes up, higher up, you'll see that plume expansion as the atmosphere gets thinner, and you can actually see there on the bottom right there, the reflection on the clouds of that launch plume. Don't get to see it often. When you do, it is very cool.
Yeah.
Also,
you can see there... Oh.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, you could see on the left-hand side there, that NVAC chill. They're chilling down that NVAC engine for ignition in just a few seconds from now.
And that will be followed by 3 events, which is MECO, main engine cutoff, then stage separation, and then SES-1, or second engine start 1. So let's stand by for main engine cutoff, which is when those 9 Merlin 1D engines will shut down for now. And there we go. There is stage separation.
Look for the flip. Also
There's
full nozzle.
There it is, an ignition of
Oh.
the second stage. And now we have the boost back burn coming up here for that first stage where it's going to turn itself all the way around, fire its engines so that it returns on a trajectory back towards the Cape. You can see that second stage kind of in the distance there too, of which we will not have views of that second stage because of the classified nature of the payload.
Yeah.
At the request of the customer.
Yep. At the same time, though, we're not going to see that, but fairing separation should be happening in just a few seconds. Those fairing halves are completely new for this mission, and they are being flown. They are serial numbers 220 and 221. So that's a very neat thing there to mention.
Very nice. And 3.5 minutes now into flight. So far, everything looking good. Should be wrapping up that boost back burn. And there we go. That looked good. So that will still be 2 more burns. There will still be the entry burn to help with atmospheric heating as it re-enters, as well as, of course, the landing burn. It's now on its way back to LZ-1, Landing Zone 1, just a couple miles away from where it launched at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And, of course, the grid fins deploying out there. That's those structures that you see. I'd say they look like waffles. Those help steer as it gets into the thicker parts of the atmosphere. And look at that beautiful view from stage 1.
Yep, less than 4 minutes away from that landing. It's now turning back, engines first, towards the Cape.
Yep, so that was the flip and burn, as it's called, as it flipped its direction, burned the engines, and now we hopefully get that landing. And as mentioned earlier, this would be the 50th successful landing at LZ-1 at the Cape. In addition, this also marking the 450th orbital launch for the Falcon 9 rockets, which is pretty impressive. And again, the 10th launch this month.
Yep, you can see there on the telemetry already, it's coming back down, speeding up, altitude, going down. Those pulses that you can see there, those are the RCS thrusters, nitrogen coal gas thrusters. Essentially, high pressurized bottle, and you just open the valve and let it, go out of a nozzle. Very simple thrusters.
Kind of
But
like
very
using
powerful.
a fire extinguisher to, on a rolly chair.
Exactly. Like Wall-E.
Also interesting, the altitude much lower than we're used to seeing for apogee for a Starlink, right?
No, actually, it's actually higher. Usually for Starlink, it doesn't get any higher than 120 kilometers. This one got to 136, if I'm not mistaken. So it's actually a very lofty trajectory.
Yes, and again, this one, the exact orbit not specified, other than just towards the northeast, so we can expect a somewhat high inclination, which means more angled in relation to the equator.
There's the coast of Florida coming up in the view from the booster.
And then also coming up is the entry burn, which Alex uses 3 engines to fight fire with fire, right?
Yeah, we're going to see the center engine, then 2 of the outer engines coming up. They're going to be burning for 20-25 seconds. I have not looked up the exact number, I'm sorry. But it's usually around the same time for most of the entry burns. So it's already sort of programmed into my brain. But here should be coming up soon. You will see also the grid fins turning when that happens.
Yep, and this is
the grid
to help-
fins?
There you go. This will help slow it down as it enters the thick parts of the atmosphere, using that kind of flame around it to protect the booster from parts of those thicker parts of the atmosphere and the re-entry heating. Absolutely beautiful views so far. And you can tell it's the 3 engines based on that line, and there you go. You can see starting to get some ground views as it punches through the thick clouds of Florida. And so with that, once that shuts down, we are less than a minute away from the scheduled landing. If you are anywhere along the space coast, keep an ear out for the sonic booms that you will be hearing shortly as it goes through the speed of sound.
Going through all of the clouds that we were mentioning before. Look at that. 10 kilometers in altitude.
And 1,600 kilometers an hour and decreasing. There you go. Now you can see the Cape. And that
look
is
at that.
views from Max tracking it looks like. There we go. You can see that is the landing burn. That single engine firing up. Next up will be the deployment of the landing legs. This, I believe, is the drone view.
Wow.
That is from Jerry Pike. That is a drone view of the landing and touchdown. A successful landing for the booster on its second ever flight. This one at LZ-1, and a nice end to a nice mission.
That was a nice aerial view.
Yes. And yes, we do need a super cut of all the times we said nice on this. Shout out to Jerry for the drone view all the way down there on that landing. That was spectacular. Alex, I mean, that doesn't get old.
Yeah, look at that. Wow. But also I'm seeing some cranes in the distance. I think those are from Relativity and Stoke.
Yeah. And then you see the venting. That's expected there, right?
Yeah, that is safe in the rocket as usual. Depressurization of the tanks to normal pressures, because they don't need to be at flight pressures. Flight pressures are very high. But yeah.
Wow. Again, not as easy to hear the sonic booms today. They were there. They were certainly there. You could hear them. And the view from that drone, that's an NSF drone within the safe areas. There are areas where you're not allowed to fly them. This is one where we are, and that is where we got this view from. And of course, with all of these different views, we have replays coming up, so stay tuned for those replays, which are imminent now.
Yeah, because if you saw the launch, right, we usually change cameras and whatnot to get some of the best details and everything as usual, as we do. But we can pull those feeds individually and then replay them after the launch, so we can watch again the launch and all of the different views. I think that's always neat.
And the landings especially, yes.
And the landings, yeah, sure. I completely forgot to mention that as well.
I don't know why, but I smell a YouTube short. Now I can, while we get those replays pulled, I can take a couple seconds here and thank some people. Bideford, always good to see you here, Bideford. Thank you for gifting 10 Red Team memberships. Appreciate that. Steven saying, have a great flight. Getting something from the shop at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. What do we have there? The Raptor Wrangler stickers. Nice. And then Barbara Wells, thank you for the $10 super chat. No message, but appreciated. And then Adriano asking, Alex, do the payloads have insurance if something goes wrong?
Commercial payloads, they do have insurance. Usually government payloads, they're they use the expression self-insured, right? They just essentially use that as a way of saying, yeah, if it blows up, we'll figure out what to do with that. But yeah, there's technically no insurance for a government payload.
Are you unsure about that?
I'm unsure about that. Yeah.
Oh boy, look at that! You could also see. Is that like a helicopter flying around there too? It looks like.
Yeah, I don't know. Could be from the Coast Guard, Space Force. There's a nearby. There's this skid strip nearby, right?
Oh yeah.
Between this view and the landing pad, so there could be some operations there that we totally don't know about. If somebody's watching, right? We don't know anything.
We know nothing, Jon Snow. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh boy, but yes, the helicopter flying through the view there. Replays are incoming. It takes a second for them to get pulled from the system. That was not our crew with the flyover, unfortunately, but coming soon. I got an "Oh God, Sawyer" from Chris Bergen in chat. That's how I know I'm very. That was a good pun. That if it was aided that much by Chris B.
Someone mentioning in chat, like, isn't there a no-fly zone area? I mean, there is, but if you are the one that you're putting that no-fly zone there, and you are the one flying there, you kind of can break your own rules. Sort of like the same way that SpaceX can fly their drones also around their launch sites when they say no drones for other people.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen that, or the NASA helicopters that fly around.
Exactly.
All of those. Wesley Hale is asking, Alex, do they use the same engines for boost back, entry, and landing, or do they kind of mix it up? They've got 9 to choose from.
It's the same engines. Engines 1, 3, and no, hang on. Engines 1, 5, and 9. So the whole way that the engines are arranged, there's 8 around a center engine, right? And depending on the location around the booster, it's sort of like a clock, the same way that you have, well, the old watches, the analog watches and everything, they had, the different numbers around a circle, right? You had the 12, 1, 2, 3, and everything. So the same thing you can think of those 8 engines in that circle. And so they are number 1 to 8, and then the center engine is then the 9th engine. And so engines 1 and 5 are sort of, across of one another, and then you have the center engine that is engine 9. So yeah, that's essentially the only engines that relight are those.
And if you wanted to know exactly which ones, another way you can tell is from the merch at shop.nasaspaceflight.com, where we have a launch, entry, and landing shirt, which outlines exactly which those engines are. You can also get it on a mug, too. So you can drink your RP1 and LOX, or coffee and tea, and then find out.
It was also super coincidental, because when that was designed, I'm no part of the store or anything like that. So it was designed, with nobody asking or anything. But when I saw it, I looked at it and I was like, wait, those are actually the 3 engines that ignite, because again, it's always the same 3 positions, the engine 9, 5, and 1, right, in those positions, just like an old clock. And so it was like, yeah, those are the positions that are those engines 1 and 5 on the outside of the. So it's quite a neat thing that, it was completely accidental, and it just so happened to be like that. So yeah.
Yeah, we strive for accuracy in all of our stuff here, both on air and on T-shirts, especially on T-shirts.
I do want to say though, when we did a similar version for Blue Origin's New Glenn, and when we did that, we also tried, because we did that on accident for Falcon 9, and then when we did the one for Blue Origin, bit of inside baseball, but we did on purpose the alignment with the 3 engines that relied on New Glenn. Because on New Glenn, they have 7 engines, but it happens the same with than Falcon 9. Only 3 engines can relight of all of the 7. Not all of the engines can relight. And so it's like this sort of line across the, like, horizontal line across when the rocket is horizontal. And so that's the one that you see also on the merge for New Glenn.
Yeah, we were all part of the discussions that there was a lot of discussion trying to get that right. Of, do we know which ones? Have they released which ones? What angle is it? Is it these 3? Is it that 3? There was a lot of discussion on that. So, also saying Sawyer strives for puns. Yes, chicken, I absolutely do. And Clara, they're just saying Sawyer is a pun. So.
And I guess somebody may I have not seen this in chat, but I'm gonna get ahead because why not? Maybe some people might think, like, why is it that only a few engines can relight on the way back and not all of the engines? Like, wouldn't it make sense to have a lot of redundancy and being able to relight all of the engines or something like that? And it is true, but then it will add unnecessary weight. Because for Falcon 9, they have TTEB, what's it called? Pyrophoric material, right? That it ignites in contact with liquid oxygen. So you have to carry more bottles to hold that and things like that in order to have different configurations. It just adds a lot more to your rocket that you don't need. We've seen the same, for example, with Super Heavy. The 20-hour engines cannot relight once they are up and running already in the air. they can only be started up from the ground. But then the center 13 engines, they can all relight whenever, there's plenty of margin there for those. But it's it makes sense to have not all of the engines are going to be needed for the landing, so you don't need that much hardware. Speaking of hardware, here's some replays.
Yes, and you can see on the right the live booster that is being taken off of the drone ship, and on the left, the replay of a booster launching. So I love this view from Fleet Cam. That is at Rusty's down at the port. If you're ever looking for a place to get a bite to eat after going to see a launch, or to see the boosters come back in and you're hungry while you're there, definitely check out Rusty's. I always love that view of just, there's just some boats going by and a rocket flying to space. No big deal. The merging of marine assets and space assets, which, depending on who you ask, is a fantastic combination.
I think Gavin likes that combination.
Yeah, and Peter Beck, not so much.
He's already eaten that hat, I think.
Yeah, well, T81 had. This is a different one. Yes, Chris Bergen, I believe they do fish and chips. And this is the second view that we have over at the port. We have 2 fleet cams now, which is very nice.
I had Gator, I think it was, at Rusty's, which is fun.
Very Florida of you.
Yeah, right?
And this is the view from the KSC press site. I love how this guy just on the roof chilling out, and then it's, oh yeah, there's the rocket. Always a cool sight to see. Never a dull moment on the Space Coast, that's for sure. Big in chat saying, saw your rocket. You saw the rocket, because Sawyer. Anyway, this is a view from a static camera that we placed at the KSC press site. Again, shout out to Max. Not feeling well, but still placing all of these cameras out there, including that one. This one of the other robotic cameras that we have at the press site at 39A. I believe with Gage helping with the tracking on it. Unless this was the auto track. I'm sure we'll find out momentarily. Yep, that is Gage tracking. It's always a cool view because you had the view from Max, which is a little bit further south, and then you have this view from the press site, robotically tracked by Gage, which is going towards the north. So I love the different aspects, the different angles that you get from the different spots. And then, of course, the shake as it rattles the building with those engines.
Look at the vapor cone.
Oh, such a great vapor cone on that. Alex, for those who don't know, what is the vapor cone?
Well, rocket go very fast, and water vapor says, I'm gonna condensate. Basically, the rocket is just going fast enough that the humidity in the air, it just condensates around the rocket, and it gets pressurized, so to speak, because of the velocity and how it is punching through the atmosphere essentially. And so that's why you see that vapor cone around the top of the rocket.
It's still such a cool view. Let's see. This, I believe, is. Let's see. Is this Wade or is this Jerry? This is Wade, Dr. WD40 over on Twitch. Which, thank you again to Wade for allowing us to use his footage here at NSF. We appreciate it. Always gets some great stuff. Also does some cool other streams, including what's it called? Where you look for metal. Oh, here we go. We'll listen in. Yes, metal detecting. That was the word.
The car alarms.
Also, that ring that comes off the vapor cone, I love that. It was so cool. As the vapor cone dissipates, you see the remnants of it left behind. Also helps to have a very kind of cloudy day, but also usually humid and moist in the air. So that's always nice to have to get that cool shot. And then tricky with the clouds, but again, Max absolutely nailing it with that. And then, of course, we have the landings. That I believe was from one of our
Oh.
capes there. Here, this looks like Dr. WD-40 again, if I'm guessing that right. Oh, that's so
Let's
great to
see.
see it.
Yeah, that looks like it.
Yes. Right behind the trees there near Jetty Park.
Ooh, there it is. This might be Max, maybe?
This is great. Yes, this is Max's track. Let's listen for the sonic booms. Nice. And then the drone view from Jerry. This is cool. And you get to see it all the way down to LZ1.
Man,
Beautiful.
touchdown.
And there you go. That is a spectacular launch, as always. Shout out to the team down at the Cape for a fantastic job with the views today. And Alex, a shout out to you as well for the fantastic help with the commentary. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and I gotta hijack a little bit here the stream for a second, because there's things coming up here, and there's launches and everything. But if you wonder, how do you even make a spaceport, right? Like how does that even happen? Well, I have that question, and I'm going to be able to ask that to Debbie Strang, the COO of the Shetland Space Center. We're going to be interviewing. We're going to be interviewing her this Wednesday on NSF Live as part of our Europe's Future in Space series of interviews. So hopefully, I can see you all right there on Wednesday. It should be, I think it is. So it's 8 p.m. Central European time, which I'm not mistaken. It should be around 3 p.m. Eastern for those that are in America. So, or noon p.m. Pacific. Noon p.m. It's weird.
Noon PM, yeah.
Noon Eastern. Noon Pacific, excuse me. But yeah, I totally butchered this. But yeah, that's the live stream. Thank you, Carson, for pulling that out. But yeah, you can just as Carson did right there. You can get the notifications for when we go live for that. And I definitely have questions about how do you even create a spaceport out of the blue, right? And that's going to be very interesting. And yeah, let's see what Debbie has to say about that.
Also, I'm Sawyer, so it would be a high Sawyer, not a hijack of the stream. Silver Jedi, thank you for becoming a Pad Rep member. Want to make sure I acknowledge that. And of course, acknowledge Carson for pushing the buttons and pulling the levers on today's stream. Fantastic views out in the field from Dr. WD-40, Wade, from Jerry with the drone, and of course, we can't forget the fantastic, amazing Max Evans as well with that manual track there. Again, didn't have a voice, but had a view, and boy, what a view. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's launch broadcast. It was a very nice launch. And that is the last time you will hear me say nice on this stream. Until the next one. Have a good one, everybody.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, planet.
Tango down to nominal.
my god! Oh my god!
Décollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?